A very big welcome to all of our attendees. Thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to these Tuesday morning Toolbox Talks. To start off, obviously, we just want to remind everyone of the tips to continually prevent COVID-19. That would be washing your hands regularly with soap and water, or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze with a flexed elbow or tissue and throw the tissue into the bin. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects and surfaces. And if you can, do your part to get vaccinated. If you don't have the information on where to get vaccinated or how to perhaps register to get vaccinated, please reach out to us and we will give you that information as well. Now, coming up for November, obviously this week we are looking at dust. Next week we are going to be looking at wet weather, working in the rain. Is it dangerous? What type of hazards are you looking at? And what are the safety aspects to ensure that you keep yourself free from any of these dangers? And then we look at medicals. Why are medicals so important? What type of medicals should you actually be looking at, especially if you are working in the construction industry? And then finally, we end off the month with Can I Do My Own Safety Part 2. We'll remember from last month, Part 1, we will recap on those 2 points that we've discussed on risk assessment and assigning responsibility to certain persons. And then we will take a look at the mitigation strategies that we can look forward to ensuring our safety management system is as effective as possible. But let's get straight into this morning's Toolbox talk on dust. Well, what is dust? Dust is any fine powder consisting of tiny particles of earth or waste matter. This could also include things like silica dust, asbestos dust, and this all comes from the ground or surfaces, and then they are actually carried into the air. Now, this fine or dry powder has the ability to contact us. Obviously, I do apologize. We've just had load shedding. I don't know if you can still hear me, Karim.
Yes, I can still hear you, Chris. It's just I can't see your screen.
No problem. I'm just going to wait for our generator to start up quickly. I apologize for that, guys. As soon as it starts up, my screen will then automatically share with you. I do apologize for this, guys. Load shedding is something that we cannot get away from. And it only takes about 10 seconds for the actual generator to kick in for us there. Here we go. All right, we are back online. I'm just waiting for my TV to warm up and then I can share the screen with you. Karim, can I just check that you can see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen now. That's perfect.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Sorry about that, guys. I will make sure that we still finish on time. So as we mentioned, fine dust, obviously the particles that's in that dust, depending on the size, is what is actually hazardous. Now, dust can obviously irritate your eyes, can irritate your throat, your skin, and the health effects for you relate mainly to the size of the dust particle. So why is that? Well, dust may contain microscopic solids or liquid droplets that are small enough to get deep into the lungs and cause serious health problems. Now, we might think, well, large dust particles are the most irritating. They are the ones that stop up, block the nose and get into our throat and make us start coughing, or perhaps stick to the iris and then, we're not able to see for a short period of time. But the larger particles of dust are actually not what cause the biggest health concern. You see, they are immediate. They might blur your vision for a specific period of time. You might not be able to breathe for a very short period of time till you can go and get some running water and clean it out. But it's the finer, the smaller dust particles, these microscopic solids or liquid droplets that bypass the actual throat and they enter into the lungs. And this is where it becomes extremely dangerous. Now, for you as a plumber, you might think, well, is there really any real danger when I'm working? Especially because I already have my personal protective equipment on me. You see, I wear a dust mask, but do you wear the correct type of dust mask? There's a lot more that you can do to prevent dust from actually entering into your body or causing health hazards compared to just putting on a dust mask or even a respirator. What we do need to do, first of all, is ensure that the environment in which we are working in has had a risk assessment performed. You see, we want to know the duration, the type of dust that we are going to be affected by, not just the type of dust, what could be contained in that dust that has the potential to cause serious health issues. Then we want to know the duration of the employee being exposed to it and the type of machinery being used. All of this will help us to reach a specific risk assessment rating. Is it high, medium, or low? And how can we mitigate it to make sure it is as safe as possible? And things like dust suppression, the types of tools that we are using, does it have extraction on it in order to minimize the amount of dust? You see, just putting on a mask doesn't necessarily automatically protect you. It does have a form of protection, and the better mask you have, obviously, the better type of protection. But if we are relying just on general dust masks, then clearly we are not doing everything we can to protect ourselves from this. So as a plumber, if you are chasing walls, using your little breakers, or perhaps even using a grinder, if you're digging trenches or excavations, if you're drilling or even core drilling, all of this creates dust. And eventually it can become a slow killer for us. See, anyone who breathes in these dusts from the different types of tasks that you are performing should know the damage that they can do to the lungs, as well as cause serious health concerns later on. Now, there are 4 main related diseases affecting construction workers. And this would include yourself as a plumber, because sometimes the construction work you do is maybe not on a construction site, but you are working in a corporate company or even at a private home where you have access to performing these works on site, perhaps not even taking the proper precautions because there's nobody on that site that is actually checking in on you. So the 4 main related diseases are lung cancer, silicosis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and asthma. Now, some diseases like advanced silicosis or asthma can come on quite quickly, while others may come over several years of exposure. The health effects of these dusts are often not immediately noticeable, and this is where the danger lies. You see, we might be working for a couple of years saying, well, I don't have any issues. You know, I have the odd cough now and then, but I also smoke, and there's fumes, and there's pollution all around us. So there's a lot of contributing factors to the reason why I feel so ill. But we are allowing ourselves to then deteriorate a lot quicker. And eventually it gets to the point where when it is noticeable, and this is where the unfortunate part comes in, when it is noticeable, the damage done will already be serious and life-threatening. So we need to understand this. When we eventually get to the point of saying, oh, wait a minute, I actually am being affected by the dust because now I see it, well, then it could mean that you have permanent disabilities or early death brought on because of the amount of dust that we have inhaled, because we didn't do something when we couldn't see the effects. And so it is a slow killer. Sometimes it is an unseen one because we do not really see those microscopic particles that we're inhaling. But we do see the actual dust. We do notice that when we are working, the different types of dust that we are exposed to, we can actually see that. Why are we not doing anything about it right now? Well, let us educate ourselves. Let us find out what actually are we exposing ourselves to? What are the different types of dust? Where are we getting these different types of dusts? And how can we protect ourselves from it? Because out of these 3 types of dust that you are going to expose yourself to, they have health issues. They have health concerns. And remember, it's not going to show immediately. As we mentioned in the beginning, the larger dust particles might obstruct your vision or might build up in the nose and, stop you from breathing properly for a few minutes until you can clean it out or have a shower, or wash your face. So it's not very permanent. It's very quick, short, and then it's over. But what about those microscopic particles that are in that dust that you are breathing in all the time? Has that had the potential to attach itself to your lungs? Is it over these years getting worse and worse? And is it getting to the point where when it becomes noticeable, there is nothing you can do? You cannot reverse it once you have realized that it is actually affecting you. So please understand, we don't want you to do something only when you've realized the danger. We want you to do something before the danger has actually affected you. And this is how we can then eliminate the health issues related to the inhalation of dust later on. So the three types of dust that you might be exposed to: silica dust. Silica dust is created when workers or plumbers are dealing with materials containing crystalline silica, such as sand, stone, rock, sandstone, brick, concrete, mortar, as also known as respiratory crystalline silica, or RCS illnesses. Then wood dust. Wood dust is generated when working with softwood or hardwood and wood-based products such as medium density fiberboard or even plywood. You can also get a lot of wood dust, and what this contains is obviously whatever the wood is treated with. Sometimes it's these poisons that perhaps go into the wood to protect them from certain bugs, or perhaps even the treatments that go onto these woods that sit in the actual fibers or the dust that we inhale. And this contains different types of dangers for us as well. Then you have lower toxicity dust. This type of dust is created when working with materials containing little to no silica, such as gypsum, which is in plasterboard, limestone, dolomite, or marble. So although it's low toxicity, in higher doses, it is still very dangerous. But did you know of these dusts that we've just discussed? A silica dust is more injurious to health, and hence several countries have regulations to limit them. Now, inhaling respiratory crystalline silica can cause diseases like silicosis. Silicosis, and just we hope you're listening to this because this is what you are going to be facing all the time. It is an incurable disease which may lead to deadly lung disease. It is fatal. So we don't want to wait until we start seeing the effects on our body. We want to stop it now before it becomes a problem. Silica dust, as we mentioned earlier, is found in stone, concrete, mortar. All of these things that you are breaking through, chopping through, or core drilling through in order to install plumbing into. Are you protecting yourself as an employer? Are you protecting your employees from these known dangers? Now, it also may cause lung cancer and other potentially debilitating respiratory diseases, such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and even kidney disease. Now, in most cases, these diseases occur after several years of exposure and hence are predicted only during the critical stages. This is the unfortunate, sad part of these types of diseases gained because of working with dust. You see, we don't realize it until it cannot be changed. So it has to be noted that most of the wood is treated with harmful preservatives, and hence dust that is produced while working on wood with preservatives like arsenic, chromium will also be dangerous to your health. Now, most of us might think, well, again, I'm doing what I can by wearing a dust mask. But remember, we are talking about microscopic particles. So it's not the larger particles that collect on the actual dust mask. It is the microscopical one, the ones that you cannot see, that is entering through the respiratory tract and then obviously attaching itself to the lungs, causing these different types of diseases. These are the ones that are unseen, that we might not be protecting ourselves from. Perhaps even when you are working with cement, We might think, well, cement is not so hazardous. So exposure to cement dust, it just irritates our eyes, our nose, our throat, or the upper respiratory system. So it doesn't go into our lungs. It's only upper. We might have it stuck in our nose, in our ears, in our eyes, a little bit in our mouth. And sometimes when we get it on our skin, it turns a little bit dry. And so it's just very moderate irritation. And this will cause thickening or cracking of the skin. But what it can do is it can become more severe than that. Now, why do we say that? Well, I don't know if you know a company called Portland Cement. This is a light gray powder, and we're going to explain to you in the next slide how this exposure can become a lot more severe. Now, when it comes to cement dust, obviously we need to protect our respiratory tract, so we don't want to get it into our lungs. We want to have a proper respiratory mask when we work with it. We also want to have a proper eye protection, because exposure to airborne dust might cause immediate or delayed irritation or inflammation. Now, eye contact by larger amounts of dry powder or splashes of wet Portland cement may cause effects ranging from moderate eye irritation to chemical burns and blindness. Now, you might not think that you can get blind by working with cement dust, but there is a possibility. It depends on the amount of exposure to this hazard. And that is why a risk assessment is so important. You see, we've got things like when dealing with noise, a certain amount of decibels, you are not allowed to be exposed to that amount of decibels for a certain period of time. And these occupational exposure levels, in other words, we're saying you're allowed to work in that environment and be exposed to that hazard if you have all of the safety procedures in place. And even if you have them in place, you are only allowed to be exposed to it for a certain period of time. So that minimizes the risk or the damage that the body is going to go on. Now, this means that you have to have all the minimum requirements in terms of safety files, safety procedures, risk assessments, proper overalls and PPE, and all the safe working management system in place, as well as an occupational exposure level, where we are not exposed to it for a prolonged period of time. And all of these can be found depending on the type of chemical, the type of hazardous substance, the type of dust, or even the noise level or temperature that you're exposed to. The government has designed these occupational exposure levels in order to protect you as an employee. So these larger amounts of dust, cement dust, silica dust that we are exposed to, this is why we are saying that it takes a long time for it to become known. It doesn't show itself immediately, but later on may cause seriously irreversible health effects on the body. Now, as we mentioned with Portland cement, this is just a light gray powder, poses little immediate hazard. And this is why many don't take it seriously by protecting themselves for long-term exposure, because a short or single short-term exposure to the dry powder is not likely to cause serious harm. But exposure to sufficient duration, so for a longer time period, to wet Portland cement can cause serious, potentially irreversible tissue, which is skin and eye destruction in the form of chemical or caustic burns, because caustic soda is what is actually used in the design or construction of this type of cement. Now, if we do get caustic burns to our hands, this could potentially be irreversible. Another irreversible situation is when we get this in our eyes and we burn our eyes, causing blindness. Now imagine working for 30 to 40 years in your company. You get a very small package when you leave, your little bit of money in order to go and retire, but you are blind because of the amount of exposure you've experienced throughout your working life, because we didn't take it seriously enough to protect ourselves. And maybe some of you are sitting there now saying, but my employer must provide me PPE. And you would be 100% correct. The OSHA Act states that your employer is responsible to provide PPE that protects you. But there is a lot more that can be done before PPE is actually put into place. You see, there's risk assessments, there's plans, there's procedures. All of these things we should know and follow before resorting to the last form of protection, that is PPE. And yet, when we do go for PPE, make sure we do our research. See, we want to ensure that the type of PPE we are using is correct for the application of that PPE. And yes, you might say to yourself, but we don't have the budget for that. Well, losing eyes, damaging your skin, getting lung cancer is going to cost you a lot more in the future. So the budget for that should always be considered before taking on the task. All of us have a bill of quantities, a quoting procedure, something in order to ensure that we are protected. We should never rely on a budget to keep ourselves protected. We need to know the dangers, educate ourselves on the safe working procedures, and then do the research on the correct type of tools and equipment in order to protect ourselves from these future debilitating diseases. So you need to know the dangers and protect yourself from them. As we mentioned earlier, the larger dust particles may seem like your health risk, but it's the finer dust that's the most dangerous. Larger particles will then get blocked in your nose hairs or the hair-like cilia cells and mucus lining in your airways, stopping them from getting to the lungs. But it's the smaller particles that will evade your body's natural defenses and become absorbed in the bloodstream or trapped in the lungs. This is where you are starting to create life-threatening diseases now, which will only manifest later on. And when it does manifest, when you finally realize that you are being affected, it is too late. It is irreversible. Now you will live with it for the rest of your life. Although our bodies have certain white blood cells that bind to and destroy dust particles in the lungs, long-term exposure to high concentrations of dust can still harm your health. So those exposed to dusty environments are at greater risk of developing respiratory illness, which can impact their quality of life and can even be fatal. We do not want this to happen to you. So please try and protect yourself. If you're working this week in any dusty environment, find out, what have you done? What does the risk assessment tell you to ensure that you protect yourself and others from this danger? Have you ensured dust suppression has been done? Have you ensured that proper extraction is being done for any type of dust-related work? Have you ensured that the tool that you are working with has the adequate safety protection features on it that should be used all the time? What about the safe working procedure, the method statement on ensuring that you are doing it safely, the environment that you are working with, protecting others around you, maybe even by barricading it off to ensure that you have an isolated area where this type of work is being done? And then take a look at the actual personal protective equipment that you are using. Look at that dust mask or that respirator. Is it adequate? The safety glasses that you are using, does it protect your eyes, or do you need to have safety goggles? Do you need to have a face visor, for instance? Well, it will all be dependent on the type of work, the duration of work, and also the different dusts that you might be exposed to. So again, you know the dangers. What are you going to do about them? Well, let's take a look next week at wet weather, the dangers that it will bring for us. If you want to know any more information on dust environments, or the different ways that you can protect yourself, you can either do research on it, you can give us a call. Obviously, our contact details on the left-hand side there, info@ohss.co.za or 071 875 2070. You can use that as a WhatsApp number. So coming up next week, we are going to be looking at wet weather. The rainy season has obviously been here for a while. What other hazards are there out there? What are we exposing ourselves to? And how can we protect ourselves? Please don't forget, these Toolbox Talks are brought to you by our IOPSA. They are presented by ourselves at OHSS Consulting, but they are also accredited with CPD points. So if you are a SIOSH member, please don't forget to grab your 1 CPD point for every Toolbox Talk that you join, as well as for those who are a plumbing industry board, the PRB, sorry, the Plumbing Industry Registration Board. If you do have your registration with them, you can collect 0.25. That is 1 CPD point for the entire month of Toolbox Talks. So the safety thought for this week is your good health is your greatest wealth. Don't wait until it is too late. So if you have not done so yet, please go and do the COVID Compliance Officers course. It is available free of charge to all plumbing members. In fact, it is now being opened up to any person. These are courses sponsored by our IOPSA and are available to any person who wishes to go and get their awareness course or COVID Compliance Officers course done at the moment. Also, 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, the Man in the Van Education Through a Conversation podcast is happening. So please find them on those various apps. And then finally, those tips to continually prevent COVID-19. Please do your part and protect yourself and others. And we also want to say thank you for joining us every Tuesday morning. We look forward to chatting with you in the next coming weeks to bring you Toolbox Talks that you want to hear. So if you have any topics, please let us know.